Hi everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today's video will cover a completely new way to play Dante using the Phahd scaffold as well as something called Schrodinger's Damage. Now, Schrodinger's Damage is also known as Universal Damage or Miscellaneous Damage. Miscellaneous Damage was originally discovered by Kaylee, who I found in Kai's Warframe Discord. I made sure to contact her and we started testing. I found a bunch of extra interactions as well as the ones she already had in a Google Doc. I made a completely separate video on this, stating all of the interactions that the Phahd scaffold has with this Schrodinger's Damage. So definitely check out that video so you are up to speed to understand what's going on in the build that I will show today. Anyhow, without further ado, let's get into this Dante build. So here's my Dante. Let's make sure we get the Book of Death build. This is the build that I am running. I am using Growing Power for extra ability strength, Archon Continuity for some duration, as well as corrosive status effects that we are able to get in this build by proccing Toxin. Then I'm using Archon Stretch, which we are also able to activate. So this is an extra 2 energy per second for 5 seconds. Precision Intensify will greatly increase the ability damage that we are able to deal with Final Verse, as well as the strength of our Overguard caps and all of that kind of jazz, which is very nice. Then I'm using Transient Fortitude for some extra ability strength, Augur Reach for some more range, Primed Flow for our energy, as well as Equilibrium, Blind Rage for even more ability strength, and Proton Pulse. And why Proton Pulse? Well, maybe later in the video you will discover why. I will tell you exactly why this mod is quite bonkers. As for the arcanes, I'm using Arcane Impetus as well as Arcane Consequence. You can also use something like Arcane Velocity. This is also very nice to have because it speeds up the fire rate on your Noctua book that you can spawn from your first ability. Definitely a good choice. Arcane Steadfast is another nice choice. Molt Augmented, Molt Efficiency. This is basically a flex slot. Really use whatever you want. I will stick with Velocity for now. In terms of Archon shards, I'm using 2 Archon shards for casting speed because we are casting a lot of abilities on Dante. So casting speed is a saving grace. Then I'm also using 3 ability strength shards, which means more ability strength, higher overguard caps, higher status damage, higher damage. Very nice. For the abilities, I will quickly go over them. With Dante's first ability, we can summon a book. This book can do a primary fire as well as an alt fire. The alt fire is a big blast that you can see going through the enemies right now in this little demo video. If you use the primary fire, it will splinter off and hit different targets, which is nice because we can in that way prime targets with heat damage. And why heat? I will cover that in a little bit. Light Verse is his second ability. Casting the second ability twice will make sure that you get your Overguard from Triumph, which is your fourth. Then the third is Dark Verse. Casting 2 Dark Verses will give you Tragedy, which will increase your damage. Well, I should say it consolidates all of your damage over time effects, particularly Slash, Heat, and Toxin, into one big damage blast. So if we have a way of priming enemies with a bunch of Heat and Slash, we can then deal massive amounts of nuking damage all around us. If you cast the 2 and then the 3, you get a book which is called Word Warden. This will be a full copy of your Noctua book, dealing 50% of its damage. Based on the abilities or based on the damage that you deal with Dante, this book on the side of you will fire, as you can see in the promo video now as well. Will fire your shards as well. This will actually charge your alt fire on Noctua, which is really nice because we want to spam that as much as we can. Then if we cast the 3 and then the 2, what we can do is we can get some extra status damage and status damage for an ability. Now, status damage for an ability works in a way where a target is able to become more vulnerable to getting status effects on them, which basically means that the status chance that you have on your weapons is multiplied by this percentage that you see listed. Then the damage increase is another part where the damage that's done by the status effect will be increased by this percentage that's stated on this tooltip. What's interesting is that this status increase or this status damage increase is actually multiplicative to things like Toxin damage shards, so the green ones, or your elementalist mods on your guns, What is worthy of note, and I will go over that again in a little bit, is that this will be additive to the Burning Hate augment. So that pretty much covers Dante. Let's look at the weapons I'm running. First is the Panthera Prime. I covered this in the Phahd video with the Phahd and this, the secondary fire of it and melee influence triggering. We can also trigger Disarming Purity, which will cause enemies to have no gun, meaning that they have to get in melee range of you, which they will never be able to because we are shooting around the map like crazy with Proton Pulse and our dodge speed increases. Then I'm also using Amalgam Serration for extra sprint speed. In terms of modding the gun, as you can see, you don't really need anything on it. In terms of all of the primary arcanes, you can't really proc them. The only thing you can proc is primary crux with the Phahd, but we are not really using the Panthera for anything but this augment. Then for the secondary, you may have seen a Grimoire here, but it's actually important to note that if you are using the Grimoire and the Phahd, usually you can trigger the invocation mods on your Grimoire with the Phahd scaffold. However, if you are using the Grimoire and you want to trigger the invocation mods on your Noctua, you will not be able to. So make sure that if you are using this Dante build, you don't make the mistake of using the Grimoire. Instead, use any old secondary that you want, and the only thing you really need is secondary Fortifier, Amalgam Barrel Diffusion, Augur Seeker, and Augur Pact. The Augur mods are nice to just get some extra shields when we are casting our abilities, and Amalgam Barrel Diffusion actually stacks with the Amalgam Barrel Diffusion that you will be running on your Noctua, not giving 60% dodge speed, but 120% dodge speed, making us a speed demon. For the melee, I'm using the Hate Incarnon. All of the perks that you choose don't really matter. I will show them quickly here. The only thing we are really using the Hate for is the Burning Hate augment, which, as I said, stacks additively with the percent that we get from Dante's page flight. Now, this damage only applies when you are actually damaging enemies that are affected by heat, so make sure that you proc them with heat first, which we will do with our Noctua. Spoiler. Now, melee influence is a must to make sure that we are triggering this with the Phahd scaffold. Melee Elementalist increases the damage of the electricity procs that we get from melee influence, as well as all of these electricity mods, and the Bane mod will also apply to these electricity stacks that we get from influence, increasing our damage by a whole lot. So make sure that if you know what faction you are facing, you are running a Smite mod against that particular faction. As for Lasting Sting Whites here, it will actually increase the status duration of our electricity procs that we get from melee influence, greatly increasing our damage over time and making sure that everything dies and we don't have to look back. So that's it for the melee weapon. Then for the Noctua itself, this is what I'm using. The fun quirk of the Noctua is that you can use every toe mod that you want under the sun. So if we go here, we could even plop these on if we wanted to. However, I found it to be best by using this sort of setup where I have 4 of the invocation mods, so that's all of them, giving us 60% extra ability efficiency, 60% extra ability strength, 10 energy per second, as well as 60% ability duration. So we are getting an insane amount of extra buffs from this. Then Amalgam Barrel Diffusion, as I said, this stacks with the one on your secondary, so you get 120% dodge speed. The multi-shot will not stack together, so this will be weapon specific. I'm using a heat mod to make sure that we are dealing heat damage, so we can prime enemies for the Burning Hate augment. I'm using Sure Shot to up this status chance so that we make sure that we get heat damage. And then I'm using Lethal Torrent for a little bit more fire rate and multi-shot. Finally, the Canticle mod that you can put here, you can put any of the 4. I liked using the Yahoo Canticle, as this will enable you to armor and shield strip enemies within affinity range, which is quite large, by 5% every time you kill an enemy. So when we are shooting enemies, we don't have to kill them per se with the Noctua, we just have to damage them, so it counts as an assist. If we then kill the enemy with through any other means, it will cause all enemies within affinity range to lose their armor and shields, making sure that we have maximum electricity damage over time output. The arcane I'm using is Secondary Encumber. This is actually really nice because if you are using the Word Warden ability, if you have it active, and you should have at all times, you will have a chance to deal some extra random status effects, and this greatly combines with Arcane Impetus that we were using on Dante himself to get our 72% extra ability strength as well as 39% extra ability efficiency. So yeah, we are are getting a 99% ability efficiency back, so using Blind Rage is no problem for us. Then for the operator, I will quickly swap to me discussing the operator, and then I will come back right here to show you how we can use this Dante. I will give you a little simulacrum taste. Okay, so here's our setup for the operator as well as the amp. For the amp, I'm using a Cantic Prism, a Lore Embrace, and a Phahd Scaffold, of course, which is where the whole build revolves around. For the operator arcanes, I went with Magus Anomaly and Magus Lockdown because we are constantly going in and out of operator to shoot our secondary fire and trigger melee influence. Magus Anomaly will be able to passively group enemies together, which is very nice to increase the damage that our electricity procs deal. Magus Lockdown is mainly here to counter acolytes that spawn, shutting down their abilities, which is very nice for something like Violence or Malice. What you can also use is Emergence Savior to make sure that you don't die while you are in Operator. However, we are in Operator for such brief moments that really doesn't matter. Then for the Operator Arcanes, I'm using Virtuous Surge, which is 100% mandatory for this build to work. Virtuous Surge you can get from Fortuna, and this will convert your void damage to electricity damage. And the way this all works, as I said, is covered in my Phahd and Schrodinger's damage video, so definitely check that one out. Then for the other amp arcane, I'm using Eternal Eradicate. You could also consider using Virtuous Trojan for extra viral damage from your amp, which is nice to have, but if you are playing something like a Circulus Survival, this will definitely hurt you against those ghost forms of the Thrax units, so I went with Eradicate. And that's pretty much it for the operator amp and arcanes. As for the focus school, I like using Madurai. Madurai gives us a Void Strike, which is extra damage. It also gives us Sling Strength, which adds another 40% ability strength to our abilities for 20 seconds, which is very nice. More power, more good. And we also have extra casting speed, which is very nice on Dante, and you activate this by just switching to your operator. So yeah, that's what we are using for the focus school, and that pretty much covers everything. So let's get back to the simulacrum. Okay, so with the operator arcanes, the amp arcanes, and the focus school out of the way, let me also show you the companion, which I forgot. The companion we are using is the Panzer Vulpaphyla. What the Panzer Vulpaphyla can do is it has viral quills, which will passively prime enemies with viral damage, ensuring that we have maximum electricity damage output. I'm then also using the Synth Deconstruct mod. Every enemy hit by a viral quill will then have a 25% chance to drop a health orb, together with Equilibrium on our Dante will mean that we have constant energy coming into our economy, making sure that we can keep casting everything. The reason why Prime Pack Leader is here, even though we are not really using the melee, is because the Phahd Scaffold will activate melee influence, which will count as melee hits. So this will also make sure that our companion has maximum overguard all of the time. Now on Dante this doesn't really matter because his second ability twice and then the overguard regeneration that you get also applies to our pets, but on all of the other frames this is very nice to have. Then I'm using Reinforced Bond together with Calculated Redirection to make sure that we get another increase in fire rate, which helps out for the Noctua. And as well I'm using Momentous Bond in combination with Contagious Bond, that in the odd occurrence that our companion manages to kill an enemy, it's able to spread all of the electricity damage that we have applied to that target, which is very powerful. I'm using Resourceful Retriever here, but you can use any retriever mod that you like. You also have Loyal Retriever, which will get you both double credits and resources, or just the double credits. I like running Resourceful Retriever because, as you can see, credits for me are not really a problem anymore. I'm using Primed Animal Instinct and Fetch as well, which are basically mandatory slots on your beast companions. For the claws, it doesn't really matter. I have them set up with cold, magnetic, and corrosive damage. However, you can use any kind of build that you want on here, so definitely anything goes. So yeah, with all of that discussed, let's go into a little taster in the simulacrum of what this build can do. So first is sort of a rotation that we have to adopt, which is that we go into the ground twice because that triggers our Madurai passive for 40% extra ability strength. Then we go to our Noctua. Then we cast our Phahd. So we go into operator, we shoot the secondary fire and we go back. This triggers all of the invocation mods. As you can see, there's a galore of countdown timers in the top right of my screen right now. Holy moly. Everything is dying already, so let me quickly respawn them. Once we have done that, we go and we recast the Noctua to make sure that it has max damage. So we do all of this, Noctua, Phahd, everything is triggered, recast the Noctua, make sure our matter is up. Then we cast our book, our word warden, so 2-3, 3-2 for the birds, and that's pretty much all we have to do. And then we can start going crazy. So as you can see, there was millions of damage over time procs there. And then if we want to make it even higher, we can shoot an alt fire through this group of enemies to proc some heat effects, melee influence them, and they start having a pretty bad time, I would say. As you can see in the top right now as well, I'm stacking up Arcane Impetus slowly but surely to 13 stacks. Here's 11. At some point you will have 13. The 13 stacks will then actually be kept up by your birds as they deal forced slash procs, as you can see, which will keep up the timer. So no real worries there for running out of your impetus stacks or whatever. And then if you really want to, you can of course combine this with the tragedy ability. So you do this, your pod, you cast your 3 twice, and then you burst them, but they were all dead already. So yeah, this is only really needed in like level 500, I don't know, maybe even 1,000 and above. So yeah, I will also cut to some nice gameplay, and I will go over the gameplay so that you can see it function in a mission and you can see what's happening there. And before I do that, there's one more thing that I promised to show you, which is how to trigger your Proton Snap. So if you walkling and you go off, you can see Proton Pulse now triggered, which gives me a nice bullet jump. So without, I'm bullet jumping like this, and then with, if I jump off and then bullet jump, you can see I get a massive one. Now, what's nice is that if you wall edge and then go into your operator, you have a chance of it becoming active as well. And once it's active, it will be active until you respawn yourself. Even if you fall off the map, I believe it should stay active. So here we go. It definitely is. I'm very, very fast. Now, as I said, another option was to use Consequence, and using Arcane Consequence makes you just uncontrollably fast, especially with the double amalgam barrel diffusion mods. So I have to trigger it again. There it is. Then if we use the pod, you will see that we are able to trigger Consequence. There it is. And then once we have both, we are insanely fast. We can get around the map like absolute insanity. Like you can't even control this. It's insane. It feels illegal to be this fast on Dante, I would say. But yeah, let me cut to the gameplay and I will go over that as well. Okay, so here we are in a Circulus Survival. It was a Fisher mission, so hopefully I get some good prime parts. The way you start your mission is quite simple. If you have an energy pad, make sure you cast that. Then you get your Overguard first and foremost. Then you start with casting your Noctua. You start spamming your pod to make sure that you get your passive Overguard gains, your passive energy gains, and all of the other buffs. And then from there on, you make sure you build up your power strength, sling at the ground twice, recast. Cast your 2 and then 3 for the Word Warden ability. Cast your 3 and then 2 for your birds. And this is quite crazy. Getting ability strength is pretty nuts. 94,000 Overguard max, an 18 times damage multiplier on final verse, 314% extra status damage. That's pretty cracked. So yeah, in terms of playstyle, you can see it's very leisurely. You don't really have to pay that much attention. Just make sure you spam your pod every once in a while. Keep your abilities up. Keep your book and your birds up. And have fun. That's pretty much it. As you can see, we're also passively stripping some armor whenever we kill enemies that are affected by our book, or at least are damaged once. So we get armor strip in affinity range as well, which I believe at base is like 25 meters, so it's a relatively good distance. What you can actually do is you can do something like this with a Phosphor Blau to add another like insane 200 meter range or something along those lines, which makes sure that we are stripping those shields and armor from everyone. And then we keep doing this, and I will just do until the first 5 minutes have passed, so you can also see the Acolyte spawn and how I deal with that. Nidus being an absolute goated individual, giving us the umbilical cord treatment. Nidus be like the dad who's too afraid to cut the umbilical cord when his child gets born. Okay. Where's my acolyte spawn? I might have to go longer than 5 minutes, but at least I can also show you the spectral Thrax unit problem that I've mentioned before, where you are not dealing a lot of damage to them, even with Madurai. Get these back up. What you can also see now is that my impetus stacks are at 13, so we are getting the maximum effect from that as well. And if we want, we can just spam a bunch of Dark Verses and then nuke him for millions of damage. Okay, it seems like the Acolyte doesn't want to show himself, so let's stay a little bit longer. I'll just show you the Thrax and then cut to the Acolyte fight. Okay, so here's the Thrax. Let's take him down. Prime them with some heat damage for our pod scaffold. And there they go. Now I have Void Strike active, and as you can see, that has not a lot of damage. Now if they are floating on top of someone, it will be a lot of damage. Okay, so here we have Malice. And now I will alt fire. I was in my own alt fire. I want to prime him with some heat. Shoot the pod. And then from there on, he will also get armor stripped from all of the enemies dying around him. And there he already is. Gone. Dealt with. Done and dusted. Primary weapon damage is absolutely useless for me. Thanks, game. Anyhow, that's pretty much the entire Dante build. You spam your Noctua a bunch. You spam your 2 a bunch. For your overguards. The 3 and the 2 for the birds. The 2 and the 3 for the book. If you want the 3 and the 3 and the 4 for big damage. And you will never be afraid to run out of energy because you have 10 passive energy regen anyway from the Noctua. The nice thing about this is that we can actually get all of those invocation mods triggered and still have massive damage output because of the pod. Pretty funny in my opinion. Okay, anyway, let me get to extraction and I will wish you a very nice rest of your day. Oh, actually, I forgot to trigger Proton Snap, so I can go fast. Vroom, vroom. I realize I have Consequence on as well, so you can see what 160% core velocity does to your Dante. He becomes uncontrollable. 1 dodge and we were there. Okay, have a good day, guys, and I see you in the next video. Bye. And finally, of course, as always, a massive shout out to all of the channel members. If you want to become a member yourself as well, it's only $1 a month for all kinds of in-depth Warframe info, early access to videos, as well as access to my members only chat in the Discord. For now, massive thanks to Nike418, Tommel, Jamari Coleman, Mega Ninja, Dwang Nguyen Tai, Stud6Ben1Y, Pinter Aaron, Furkan Sabachi, Vixen Sage, Axel Larsen, Fury Render, Blob, Ismael Pereira, Benjamin Cooper, Nocent Linux Gaming, Jalen Saunders, and Ouija.